Thank you, colleagues. Sorry, we're going to have to move on to the next item of business, which is a statement from John Swinney, the Deputy First Minister, on COVID-19. Now, the Deputy First Minister will take questions at the end of his statement. I would encourage all members who wish to ask a question to let me know by putting their name in, or put an R next to their name in the chat function on BlueJeans. But if I may, I'll call on Mr. Swinney, the Deputy First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I would like to update Parliament on the current position in relation to the COVID pandemic. I will not announce any changes to the current restrictions, but I will set out some additional support for students, and I will also outline our current thinking on issues such as travel restrictions. First, though, I would like to give an overview of the current course of the pandemic in Scotland, and to do that I will start by giving a brief summary of the latest statistics. The total number of positive cases reported yesterday was 1,049. This represents 9% of all tests carried out and takes the total number of cases that are positive to 174,002. I can also confirm that by 8:30 this morning, 437,900 people had received their first dose of the vaccine. That includes 51% of all 80-year-olds living in the community. 2,010 people are now in hospital, a reduction of 6 from yesterday, and 149 people are in intensive care, a decrease of 2 from yesterday. I also regret to report that in the last 24 hours a further 87 deaths have been registered of patients who first tested positive over the previous 28 days. The total number of deaths under this measure is now 5,796. Once again, I send my condolences to all of those who have lost a loved one during this pandemic. Presiding Officer, the figure for new deaths that I have just read out is heartbreaking, and the number of new cases and of people in hospital continues to be of deep concern to the Government. But recent figures should also provide us with some cautious confidence that the lockdown restrictions are beginning to have an effect. At the start of the year, in the 7 days to Friday the 8th of January, an average of 2,356 people in Scotland were testing positive for COVID every day. That's 302 new cases for every 100,000 people in the population. Last week, in the 7 days to last Friday, that number had fallen from 2,356 to 1,384. That is approximately 180 new cases for every 100,000 people. There now seems to be little doubt that the lockdown restrictions are reducing case numbers rather than simply stabilising them. But case numbers still remain far too high. In fact, they are still more than a third higher than they were just 1 week before Christmas. And of course, because we've had high infection rates for many weeks now, our National Health Service is under considerable strain. As Parliament has just been advised, there are currently around 2,000 people in hospital with COVID. That is about 500 people more than was the case last April. And there are approximately 150 people in intensive care with COVID. That is fewer than in the spring of last year, but it still puts a significant burden on the National Health Service as it tries to handle other winter pressures. We're now seeing some evidence that hospital numbers may be starting to stabilise, but they will take time to fall, and at the moment any relaxation of restrictions could cause them to increase further. All of this means that although we are definitely seeing signs of improvement, the position in Scotland remains precarious. As a result, at this morning's Cabinet meeting, as I have indicated, we decided not to make any changes to the current lockdown measures. They will remain in place until at least the middle of February. This means, among other things, that there is no change to the current position in relation to education. Remote learning for school pupils will continue to be the default position, and we will provide a further update on education arrangements next week. And for university and college students, plans for a staggered return will be kept under continuous review. Presiding Officer, these current restrictions are tough, and the Scottish Government is constantly assessing whether there is additional support that we can provide to the organisations, businesses and individuals who need it most. In relation to business, it is maybe worth noting that this week new funds have been launched to provide support for brewers, travel agents, our wedding industry and indoor football centres. In relation to support for individuals, I've just mentioned our colleges and universities. The pandemic has caused additional financial difficulties for students. For example, many students who were reliant on part-time jobs have found themselves out of work. The ongoing restrictions around student accommodation are also causing difficulties for students and also for educational institutions. The government has decided today, therefore, to allocate a further £30 million worth of support. £10 million of this will be used to help colleges and universities which have lost revenue, for example if they have refunded rents for accommodation which is not being used. And £20 million will provide further hardship support for students, including students who are having to pay rent on properties that they cannot occupy. We are hugely grateful to our students and our educational institutions for the way in which they are cooperating with us and helping us to tackle COVID. We hope that this support will help them to manage as they do that. Presiding Officer, the Cabinet this morning also discussed the support grants that are paid to people who are self-isolating. We will make an announcement soon on extending eligibility for those grants, and Parliament will be updated at the earliest possible opportunity. Providing help for those who need it most while they are self-isolating is clearly the right thing to do, and it will also help us to keep the virus under control. It is one of the ways in which we can strengthen our test and protect system in the weeks and the months ahead. Travel restrictions will also play an important part in keeping the virus under control by reducing the risk of new cases and new variants being imported. We have engaged with the UK Government for some time on improving border controls, and while we have had some discussions on issues such as quarantine hotels, we have not yet been cited on what the UK Government intends to announce or when it intends to announce it. I understand that decision has been deferred to this evening. Border controls will work best on a four-nation basis. Otherwise, for example, if Scotland establishes a supervised quarantine regime and England does not, that could be problematic if unrestricted travel between Scotland and England resumes. The Scottish Government believes that a comprehensive system of supervised quarantine is required, and so I can confirm that the Scottish Government will initially go at least as far as any UK Government announcement in enhancing quarantine arrangements, including through the use of hotels. However, if these UK restrictions are at a minimal level, we will look at other controls we can announce, including additional supervised quarantine measures that can further protect us from importation of the virus, and we will set those out next week. Any additional travel restrictions will of course create further difficulties for our aviation industry, and we believe that the UK Government should provide support which recognises that. Any support for the aviation sector, which the UK Government does provide, will be passed on to the sector in Scotland through consequential funding. Presiding Officer, in addition to travel restrictions and test and protect, our vaccination programme will also play an increasingly vital role in keeping the virus under control. We have now given a first dose of the vaccine to more than half of over 80-year-olds in Scotland. In addition, 95% of older care home residents and 95% of frontline health and social care workers have now received their first doses. Letters are going out at the moment to people in the age group 70 to 79, and we expect to give a first dose of the vaccine to everyone in that age group by the middle of February. In time, but not immediately, but in the very near future, vaccination should start to significantly reduce the number of people who die from COVID. In the longer term, as more and more people are vaccinated, we should see an impact on hospital admissions and transmission rates. And of course, ultimately, the vaccination programme, combined perhaps with some continuing restrictions, offers us a way out of this pandemic. However, for the immediate future, as I have outlined, very strict restrictions continue to be necessary. And as part of that, it is essential that people who have had the vaccine continue to follow the rules, and that we all still physically distance from people who have had the vaccine. Presiding Officer, I know that these restrictions remain difficult for people across Scotland to endure, but they are essential and they are working. They are reducing case numbers, and by doing that, they are saving lives. So I would appeal to members of the public to stick to the letter and also the spirit of the rules. If you live in a Level 4 area, and Level 4 of course includes the whole of mainland Scotland, then you must stay at home unless you're going out for an essential purpose. Do not have people from other households in your house, and do not go into theirs. Work from home wherever possible, and if you are an employer, support your employees to work from home if they can. And follow the facts advice at all time when you are out and about. By doing that, we can protect ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities. We can relieve some of the pressure that health and care workers are currently facing, and we can keep the virus under control while vaccinations proceed. So please stay at home, protect the National Health Service, and save lives. I express the government's thanks to everyone who is doing exactly that.
Thank you very much, Deputy First Minister. We will now take some questions. Our first question is from Jamie Green, to be followed by Jackie Bailey. Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Deputy First Minister for signing a statement, and we offer our condolences to those who have also lost their lives in recent days. We heard this morning from education expert Professor Lindsay Pattison that the learning experience of half of our school pupils is still not satisfactory. And we know that despite the very best efforts of our teachers, the plans for online learning are still letting down many parents and pupils. Of course, we welcome the extra funding made available today and announced for students at university, something which we called for. But I also hope we might see some urgency from this government to give all pupils the same online learning experience that they deserve, because we must stop the attainment gap from growing even wider. Today, though, I would like to ask the Deputy First Minister about our key weapon in the fight, get our pupils back into classrooms and get life back to normal for everyone. The SNP's COVID vaccine rollout has been slow and it has been sluggish. Yesterday, the First Minister tried to blame that on delayed figures, which we can see from today's statement is simply nonsense. People do not understand why this government has 500,000 doses of the vaccine sitting there unused. Now, the SNP's own vaccination plan says that those doses are available for, I quote, next day delivery. But we know that vaccines are just not getting out to GPs quickly enough. The BMA Scotland's Dr. Andrew Bewes said this morning that reaching the target of vaccinating all over 70 by the middle of February is going to be a big ask. And we've had many reports today from over 70s right across the country having to travel miles from their GP to get the vaccine. This is the postcode lottery we've been warning about for months. So let me ask Deputy First Minister, we must end this vaccine postcode lottery. Will he now commit to publishing each individual health board's vaccination plans so the public know exactly what is going on right across Scotland? And in light of the BMA Scotland's concerns today, is he fully confident that the target to vaccinate all over 70s and the clinically vulnerable by the middle of February will still be achieved? Or has that now slipped, just as the target to vaccinate the over 80s did? And finally, can the Deputy First Minister please explain to everyone who cannot understand what the hold-up is, why are 500,000 doses of this vaccine not getting out faster to our GPs and into people's arms?
Deputy First Minister.
Officer, there's a vast amount in that question, so if you'll bear with me, I will walk my way through all of the different topics. First of all, in relation to education, I listened to Professor Lindsay Pattison on the radio, and I was encouraged to hear him say that there had been significant strengthening of the delivery of education in the delivery of remote learning in January of this year, which I think is a fair reflection of the superb efforts been made by our teaching profession. Education Scotland have already published the first of the thematic reviews of the approach been taken by local authorities. I think that presents encouraging news about the way in which education is being delivered to children and young people around the country, and our educators are doing everything they possibly can do to make sure that the needs of children and young people in their own classrooms are adequately met by the delivery of education. So I think there is huge progress being made, and that is making an impact on the education of children and young people around the country. Secondly, to move on to the issues around the vaccine, I've rehearsed this issue before, as other ministers have. There are not 500,000 doses of the vaccine in our hands in Scotland able to be used at this present moment. There are more vaccines that have been allocated to Scotland than are in our hands, and they will be drawn down as soon as the distributors are able to verify those supplies and to distribute them on to us in Scotland. And that's the orderly path that we are taking. We are on course to complete the vaccination of all over 80-year-olds by the end of the first week in February. And the progress that has been made reaffirms that pattern of delivery. And there are now letters arriving in the households of individuals in the over 70s grouping, inviting them to come for their vaccinations. Now, some of these vaccinations will be undertaken in centres that are not local GP centres. But that is for very good reason, because in many cases they will be undertaking significant volumes of vaccination, which is more akin to the delivery of the Pfizer vaccine, which of course comes in much larger batches than the Oxford AstraZeneca. So there is a clear rationale as to why that would be the case. So let me reassure Parliament and members of the public that good progress has been made on the delivery of the vaccine for over 80s. We have already got to over 95% for care home residents. We know the care home residents are the ones who are the most at risk of morbidity from COVID. We have got to over 95% with care home residents. We are in a majority now in over 80s, and that task will be completed by the end of the first week in February, and we will move on to the next priority grouping and complete that by the middle of February, as announced.
Thank you very much, Deputy First Minister, and I hope not all the questions will be quite as long as Mr Green's. Jackie Baillie to be followed by Willie Rennie.
Can I start by thanking the Deputy First Minister for an advance copy of his statement, and I too regret the further deaths from COVID in Scotland and send condolences to all those affected. We do know that many families are worried about the continuing closure of schools. There are multiple cases of families in my constituency and indeed across Scotland struggling to homeschool their children. Education Scotland point to a lack of Chromebooks, poor IT, poor broadband, and teachers report a lack of support and guidance. Children are simply falling through the gaps, and many, far too many, are being left behind. Local councils are struggling to provide the resources for the scale of the educational challenge faced. Today, we hear from Audit Scotland that councils have a staggering budget gap of £767 million as a result of COVID. So can the Deputy First Minister tell me, therefore, why the Scottish Government is sitting on £800 million of unspent money from the UK Government for COVID-related expenditure? Why is this not being allocated to help struggling families homeschool their children? And why is the SNP not putting our children's education and well-being at the very top of the agenda?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, that was the familiar take on all issues education from Jackie Baillie, and of course it is far from reality. The government has put in place resources to support the delivery of education in the exceptional circumstances that we face, whether that was the money we put in place to recruit 1,400 additional teachers and in excess of 200 additional support staff within our education system, or the £45 million that I just allocated a couple of weeks ago to assist in the delivery of education by the recruitment of further staff or by the enhancement of IT connectivity for individual pupils, or whether that is the £25 million that the government has already put in place to purchase Chromebooks and connectivity solutions for 70,000 pupils the length and breadth of the country, which was the estimated number of children and young people who had difficulties accessing technology that were provided to us by local authorities. So the government has put in place a huge amount of financial support to assist the delivery of education at local level. In addition to that, Education Scotland has provided what I would describe as well-received curricular advice by the education system. It has been endorsed by the Education Recovery Group, which of course involves local authorities and also professional associations. And in addition to that, Education Scotland has been working with local authorities to provide the resources for online learning that are provided by eSchool and by the West of Scotland and Tayside Collaboratives, which provide over 500 recorded lessons available to be utilised by schools around the country, in addition to tutorial support for senior phase pupils in their in pursuing their qualifications. So there is a huge amount of, I think, very welcome support that's available to educators around the country. We will continue to enhance that as each week goes by, but I want to conclude my answer by thanking members of the teaching profession for the extraordinary efforts they have gone to make sure that young people are well supported by remote learning in the current difficult circumstances that we face.
Thank you very much. And we call Willie Rennie to be followed by Patrick Harvey. Willie Rennie.
Back at the beginning of the vaccine programme, but the explanations simply don't add up anymore. Scotland is around 140,000 vaccines behind where we should be compared with the equivalent in England. The programme in England is getting faster, in Scotland it's getting slower. It may take more time to vaccinate care home residents, but that should not hold back the rest of the rollout of the vaccine. Now, I listened carefully to his earlier answer, but is the Deputy First Minister really denying he has any vaccines in storage that could be with GPs?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, there are obviously vaccines that are being distributed to general practitioners at the present moment, and there will be supplies available in GP practices, because quite clearly, if a GP is going to give a commitment to vaccinate an individual in several days' time, they have to be confident about the supplies that they have got. So a vaccination that may be undertaken, let's say, for example, on Friday, the GP will have to be confident that they have got a supply in store to enable that to be the case. So we are, of course, distributing supplies to general practitioners, and those supplies are being distributed on a constant basis. They will continue to be drawn down according to the requirements and the needs of GPs in relation to fulfilling the categorisation that has been agreed through the acceptance by the government of the priorities of the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. So we are drawing down the vaccine to enable us to fulfil the commitments we have given in those priority groupings and within the timescales that are set out. But I think it's a pretty understandable and simple point that GPs will have to be assured when they are giving commitments to members of the public that vaccinations will take place, that they actually have the supplies available to them to enable them to undertake those tasks. And that is, of course, what general practitioners and what the health system are focused on making sure is the case.
Thank you. Patrick Harvey to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'm grateful for the advance copy of the statement. I welcome the fact that there is progress toward a quarantine policy for new international arrivals, and in particular the use of quarantine hotels. This has been successful in many other countries. Will the availability of hotel capacity place a limit on the number of daily arrivals to ensure that we don't have people arriving and know where to send them to if they are required quarantine? And more importantly, if quarantine hotels are going to be an effective policy for the relatively small number of international travels, why is this approach not also being taken for the much larger number of people within our population who are required to self-isolate? Again, some of the countries most successful at tackling COVID have been much more ambitious about supported self-isolation. The quarantine hotel policy should reflect our approach to these people needing to self-isolate as well.
Deputy First Minister.
Presiding Officer, there are two distinct but related issues in the question that Patrick Harvey has put to me. The first is in relation to quarantine hotel arrangements, and Mr Harvey will understand that the government is considering many of the details about this question and will update Parliament at the earliest possible opportunity, and that work is very actively underway within government just now. I don't think there would be an issue about capacity being available. There is quite clearly capacity within the hotel sector, given the absence of tourism and business travel activity at the present moment. So I don't think there would be any operational challenges in that respect. What we obviously have to make sure is that there is an aligned system to make sure that all cases can be properly dealt with as appropriate. In relation to the questions on self-isolation, as I indicated in the statement, the government has put in place already measures around self-isolation financial support. We are looking afresh at that to determine whether it is adequate, and we will come back to make further announcements about that in due course, because the substantive point that Patrick Harvie makes is correct. One of the most effective ways of interrupting the spread of the virus is by making sure that individuals are self-isolating where they are testing positive. For some individuals in society, that will be easier given their domestic and financial circumstances than it will be for others. And we have to respectfully approach that issue, and that is exactly what work the government is looking at the present moment, determine what is the appropriate level of support to enable that to be the case.
Thank you. Now, all the parties have had a long opening question, so hopefully we'll make progress through the other questions. Stuart McMillan to be followed by Brian Whittle. Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Deputy First Minister highlight what funding is available to taxi operators, as they don't appear to be eligible for the Taxi and Private Hire Driver Support Fund, yet they often actually cover the costs of the licences and overheads for the drivers?
John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the eligibility criteria for this scheme have been set out, and obviously if a taxi operator is meeting those eligibility criteria, they will be able to receive appropriate financial support. So I would simply encourage taxi operators to consult that criteria and to identify the routes and the basis by which they may be able to access the financial support that's available for taxi for the taxi system within Scotland.
Thank you. Brian Whittle to be followed by Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As more of the most vulnerable are vaccinating, this is inevitably going to have an effect on the need for restrictions. So can I ask the Deputy First Minister what modelling the Scottish Government has done to adapt restrictions and develop a roadmap out of those restrictions as more of the most vulnerable are protected? I'm especially concerned around access to loved ones within care homes and the impact the vaccines will have within those care homes.
Deputy First Minister.
I understand the significance of the question that Mr Whittle raises, and the sensitivity and the necessity of loved ones to be able to visit their loved ones in care homes. But one of the issues about which the government will be anxious to stress the importance, even once vaccination has taken place, for individuals to follow the rules on physical distancing and the wider regime that we have put in place to try to prevent the circulation of the virus. I think one of the things that we are worried about is that there is a sense that once people are vaccinated, the pressure is off. The pressure is not off at all, because COVID will still be in our community, which is why I made the point in my statement earlier on of the importance of still following the many of the rules and the restrictions that are in place, even once people have been vaccinated, to provide the maximum protection for individuals within our society. So we will continue to set out what is the safe way to proceed, but I think it's important that I stress the importance of us operating in a fashion where we follow the rules that are in place to ensure that we minimise the spread of the virus from individual to individual.
Thank you. Claire Adamson to be followed by Rhoda Grant.
Very much, Presiding Officer. Deputy First Minister, a number of businesses in my Motherwell and Wishaw constituency have not been able to access financial support for lack of a business bank account. Will the Scottish Government consider widening its main support schemes to allow local authorities to verify applicants in other ways, such as council tax or VAT registration, and get financial assistance to those businesses without a business bank account?
Deputy First Minister.
Officer, our framework is based on the a pretty fundamental point that most businesses will have business bank accounts. But we have recently widened the eligibility criteria to give some flexibility to local authorities to use other data where they are satisfied that the business is operating in the fashion that we would all ordinarily accept or expect. So there is more flexibility now in place to local authorities to use evidence in addition to the existence of a business bank account.
Thank you. Rhoda Grant, to be followed by Christine Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. After COVID business support funds are announced, there is a delay while the Scottish Government issues the criteria for each fund to councils. This builds in delays, and because these monies are ring-fenced, it also makes it difficult for councils to meet the specific needs of their own areas. And while there are discretionary funds available, they're small in comparison. Will you consider removing the ring fence from all COVID business support funding and allow councils to deal with the differing needs of their own communities?
Deputy First Minister.
I understand the difficulty here, Presiding Officer, but what I would invite Rhoda Grant and members to reflect on is the government is often encouraged to put in place specific funds for specific sectors to provide assurance to individual sectors that there is financial support available to them. I was just asked by Mr McMillan a short time ago about the available support for taxi drivers, for example, where there has been quite clear parliamentary and community proposals for such ventures to be brought forward. So I think there is a need to reflect both the general levels of business support, which the Strategic Business Framework Fund that we have in place is designed to do, and the specific funds that are available for individual sectors to try to make sure that we are meeting the needs of everybody in these circumstances. That we move at pace with local authorities to agree the eligibility criteria to ensure that we can distribute money as quickly as possible, and that's very much the thinking that goes into the approach behind the various schemes that we have in place for local authority distribution.
Thank you. Christine Graham, to be followed by Edward Mountain.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Deputy First Minister, in my constituency, food bank volunteers at Pennycook have already received their first vaccination from NHS Lothian, which defended this by saying the Scottish Government guidance was not clear. Category 2 of the JCVI priority list states frontline health and social care workers, as indeed does NHS Lothian's frequently asked questions site. Now, I applaud and value the contribution of food bank volunteers, but I would not have defined them as frontline social care workers. Deputy First Minister, is NHS Lothian just plain wrong?
Deputy First Minister.
Presiding Officer, we would expect all health boards to follow the very clear guidance that's been set out by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, and indeed some further detail on this has been provided by the Chief Medical Officer to aid understanding and appreciation. I think the guidance is really very clear. I think it involves no ambiguity about the criteria that are involved, and I would assure Christine Graham that the government has taken forward a message to set out clearly and simply the priorities set out by the Joint Committee, which is a prioritisation based on the exposure to risk of COVID and the risk of mortality. And it's a very serious set of criteria that have been set out, and criteria which I think are very clearly understood by all.
Edward Mountain, to be followed by George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Deputy First Minister, in the remote Highland communities, vaccination of the 80+ group is patchy. I'm hearing of some GPs who will only receive their first batch of vaccine for this group this week, making the original target of vaccinating them by the end of January unachievable. Can you confirm that the revised target for completing the vaccination of the 80+ group of the 6th of February will indeed be met by the Highlands and Islands? The GPs are not convinced, and if not, what additional support the Scottish Government will provide to speed up vaccine to roll out across my region?
Deputy First Minister.
I think Mr. Mountain's question, I think it's into some of the detail that I was rehearsing with Jamie Green earlier on, that obviously when we get to some of the more remote communities that will be part of the Highlands and Islands area, there will be challenges because of quite literally the batch sizes that the vaccine will come in. The batch size for the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is 80 or 100. The Pfizer vaccine, if my memory serves me right, is much closer to 1,000. So obviously there are constraints about the opportunities to utilise the different versions of the virus, the vaccine, in different parts of the community. What I can assure Mr. Mountain about is that very good progress is being made by NHS Highland in the distribution of the vaccine, and we are confident that the targets that we have set of completing this exercise by the end of the first week in February for over 80s will be met. The supplies, we believe, are available to ensure that is the case, and I know that general practitioners are wholly committed to ensuring that this can be done within the timescale that has been set out.
Thank you. George Adams, to be followed by Jenny Mara.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the Deputy First Minister agree with me that with furlough scheme set to end in March, this could cause further uncertainty for businesses and their employees? And surely not the only MSP who had issues with constituents losing their jobs or uncertainty and the chaos that pursued towards the end of last year. So can I ask if the Scottish Government is making representations to the UK Government to ensure that businesses have greater clarity and certainty should current restrictions need to stay in place beyond March?
Deputy First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the extension of the furlough scheme, albeit at the last minute, was very welcome, and it has provided important stabilisation support within the economy. We believe there is a strong argument for it to be maintained, and we are making those representations to the United Kingdom Government, and we hope that the UK Government will recognise the gravity of the economic challenge that we face merits the continuation of the furlough scheme for a continued period.
And Jenny Mara, to be followed by Richard Loyal.
Presiding Officer, I want to ask why unpaid carers have moved down the vaccination priority list from the first wave to Group 6, which is now in May. And I also have a constituent who has been refused the COVID vaccine because of an allergy to penicillin. Does this not exclude large numbers of people? And if the Deputy First Minister doesn't have that answer to hand, would you be able to write to me on this issue, please?
Deputy First Minister.
Presiding Officer, on the first point in relation to the prioritisation for the vaccine, we are following the advice given to us by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, which we believe to be the robust and reliable assessment of the groups that face the greatest degree of risk from the virus. And we are following that to make sure that we reduce the risk of mortality as a consequence of the virus. Now, in relation to the second point on the case that Jenny Mara has raised with me, I will explore that issue directly and arrange for the Health Secretary to reply to Ms Mara on that question. Obviously, it's important that clinical advice is offered in all circumstances in relation to the virus, but I'll ensure that that detail is supplied to Jenny Mara in due course.
Thank you. And Richard Lyle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Finances at this time are dire for families. The £20 a week uplift in universal credit has been an essential lifeline for hard-pressed families, helping keep their heads above water during the pandemic. Yet the Westminster Government are intent on removing this crucial funding. This will plunge already struggling families into financial turmoil. Can the Deputy First Minister explain what discussions the Scottish Government has had with Westminster about extending this vital support?
Deputy First Minister.
Presiding Officer, Mr Lyle is absolutely correct that this is an important, critical lifeline support for individuals within our society. The Government has written on 4 occasions to the United Kingdom Government to press for such an uplift. It's obviously a very live issue within the UK Government and within the UK Parliament, and we will continue to add our voices to the necessary and legitimate argument to ensure that that uplift is paid and vital support is made available to members of the public within our society.
Thank you very much, Deputy First Minister and colleagues. We're going to have to conclude that item there. Apologies to Pauline McNeill, who's still waiting to ask a question. But we're going to move on to the next item of business, and I'm going to hand over the chair to my colleague, Lewis MacDonald.